Hello everybody, welcome back to my little corner of the internet where I will talk about the stories of my life, my work both as a comic book author and a translator, my cats Hey Hey and Serengeti, and the occasional movie, book or TV series review and recommendation, as well as some rants if the feeling hits. I have been hearing a lot lately about the good old complaint about why LGBT plus fans want to make every single character gay everywhere, so let's talk about that. Full disclosure here. I write fanfic. I have written fanfic since I was about 16 and was lying about my age to get into a certain Yahoo group, because that is how old I am, you kids, and fell in love with Due South. And yes, I write a slash, which means that I have a very specific bias on this subject. But I do hope that I can explain things as objectively as I can. Anyway, precisely because I have been in the writing fanfic side of the fandom for so long, there is one particular argument against fangirls that I hear all the time. I heard it when I was in those Yahoo groups, when I moved to LiveJournal, and when iCarve of Our Own started, and I keep hearing it now. Even more, because now people are actively asking why there are not more characters who are not cisgender and heterosexual in media. And that is a good old, why do you want every character to be gay? It was annoying back then. I will not deny it. While I am not going to make the claim that the slash fic is more than wishful writing, it was really annoying to keep hearing about how it was somehow just wrong because the characters weren't gay in canon. This from people who insisted that said characters would bang every woman in the canon, even those who hated them. It is even more annoying now when we get some representation in certain media, because now the argument is, why do you want X character from Y series to be gay when A character from B series, that is a completely different genre, is already gay? So let's talk about why LGBTQ plus fans don't want every character to be queer, even if you hear it about every series that you like. Let's be honest. We have all seen this headline, especially on slow news days. Fans demand that X character becomes LGBTQ+. This, of course, creates a huge storm on social media where the usual suspects, you know who, and some quite clueless people who haven't yet managed to figure out the pattern start complaining about the dreaded LGBTQ+ agenda and how all media is controlled by rainbow capitalism and there's a war against heterosexuality because, and I quote, they want all characters to be gay. If by some miracle of the universe you have managed to avoid that one, then if you are a slash fan, you have heard of a friend looking at your fan art or the commissions you have bought ask you, why do you want all characters to be gay? Or the slightly more judgy version, why do you fangirls want all characters to be gay? That is, of course, if you are not the friend asking, hopefully due to a misunderstanding, why do you want all characters to be gay? Yes, I have repeated that question a lot and we have just started the video. But this is because seriously, it's the one question that happens every single time a new fandom or even a new series for established fandom comes up. I am going to assume that if you are one of the people who ask the question, you come with good intentions. You have just drunk the Kool-Aid about how somehow heterosexuality is in danger because there is one new series who happens to not follow the heteronormativity we usually see in media. You don't think that gay characters ruin a story, nor that making a character gay ruins them. You may just think that, why don't people create their own gay characters? Which has its own issues, but for now we are not going to go there. Or that, what does them being gay has to do with the story? Which also has its own kind of worms, but again, let's put a pin on that and continue. That is to say, you are not actively homophobic, you have nothing against gay people, it's just that you don't get why it matters to them. Now, notice I said actively homophobic? Yeah, that is because I have some bad news for you. The idea that gay characters need to justify their existence in the narrative in any way is homophobic on itself. Now, This doesn't mean that you, the person listening to this, are homophobic, but that the idea is, because it pretty much says that gay people need to justify why they are anywhere, while heterosexual characters have the right to just be. Again, you, person listening to this, are not homophobic, but maybe you should question yourself, why is it that you need a justification for a character that is not straight instead of just shrugging and move on? But, I hear you saying, one or two is okay. But come on, how is it that every time a new character, movie, whatever is announced, everyone wants them to be gay? That is the problem. And here is where we have to discuss both what every time and everyone means. Because once again, those two generalizations cause a lot of confusion, especially when sometimes, on slow news days, as I said, everyone means 3 people on Twitter who were vocal about it. And this is not just with the character sexualities. On slow news days, one person tweeting, "I wish I was in Mars," becomes, "The millennials want to abandon the planet," if a reporter is pressed enough to finish an article right now. Not only that, while fandoms are intersectional, if one person wants, say, Steve Rogers to admit his unending love for Bucky Barnes, because it's not as if Steve didn't pretty much throw everything aside just to help and be with Bucky, doesn't mean that the same person wanted Sherlock and Watson in Sherlock to marry each other, or that Elsa from Frozen needs a girlfriend. Which is to say, every fan doesn't want every character to be gay, but more like, with more than 837 billion people in the planet, if every single one wanted only one different character to be gay, well, we would still have the idea that in the world, people want 7 billion gay characters, which is not really how this works, you know? Now, once we have agreed that everyone doesn't really mean everyone, and that every character doesn't really mean every character, let's go to the other half of the question. Why make them gay? Once again, gay here is doing some heavy lifting. Because it's not just gay, not really. It's also trans, bisexual, or really anything that is not straight. But since the most common mentioned pairings are the same sex, and the other sexualities are either ignored for the general public or misunderstood, high biphobia, well, everything gets summarized into gay. The short answer to the question is, why not? Yes, seriously. Why not have main characters that are not straight? Why not write fanfic or draw fanart where there's far more diversity in romantic options than the usual heteronormative one? I mean, no one complains when it comes to fanfic with different heterosexual couples from the actual canon ones, because of course the answer to why write Jean Grey marrying Wolverine instead of marrying Cyclops is why not? Some people think that Jean is better with Logan. However, if the question was, why not write Cyclops marrying Wolverine instead of Jean Grey, the same person would probably go, because Wolverine is not gay! And yes, it is Wolverine's manhood which will be defended most of the time. Cyclops will either be included as neither are gay or as an afterthought. Now, for a longer answer, because it's a new story. It's a different story, and it's valid to imagine new and different stories with old characters, because mankind has been doing that pretty much since we invented stories. And we have to first and foremost remember that usually this starts in fanfic. And I have already talked about why claiming that you can't write something in fanfic is a dangerous slippery slope. Yes, hey, can I? Yes, we know that you like fanfic, hey. Yes, I will tell them your favorite fanfics later. And while criticizing some things that are found in fanfic is possible, an outright ban is pretty much stupid. In the old days of LiveJournal, we had a saying, "Your kink is not my kink, and that's okay." And that also comes with the ship and let ship motto. If someone ships a couple that is not a couple in canon, it doesn't really affect canon. There are about 62,640 Bucky Stiffs stories in Archive of Our Own, and in comics, they remain strictly heterosexual. Now, speaking about the everyone is not everyone. I don't ship Stocky, the pair name for Bucky and Steve. My personal cup of tea when it comes to the Avengers in the cinematic universe is the pairing commonly known as Stanner or the Science Boyfriends, Bruce Banner and Tony Stark. This is a far less popular pairing, by the way, since it only holds about 5,501 fics on the same archive. But that didn't mean it didn't manage to get on national news when the late hosts started showing Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo fan art of their characters in different intimate situations. Which, by the way, used to be a big no-no in the fandom. Back in the day, the rule was do not show shipping arts to the actors, writers, producers, no matter what. And while there's still a part of me that crinks a bit when I see or hear about shipping arts being shown to the actors, the bigger part of me is glad when they react with such gusto and joy as Downey Jr. and Ruffalo did. Not because it somehow made Stanner canon. It didn't, and in the next movie we had the joy of a very heteronormative romance being shoved between Bruce and Natasha, but because they actually seemed happy to see that their acting had inspired people to imagine something different. Which is the point of these fanfics, really. I mentioned the Natasha plot tumor in my video about plot tumors, so I won't go too much into it. But let's be honest, it's a tired trope. The Beauty and the Beast only with superheroes, which has been done to death. For many writers, the idea of Tony Stark, ultra-privileged rich boy, falling in love with Bruce Banner, who is basically the most social justice advocate of the Avengers, opened up a lot of narrative ideas that are not there with an heterosexual romance. Even the idea that Tony just doesn't mind the Hulk and in fact accepts him is what made people want to write about them. As I said before, it's an exploration of new ideas. With established characters, would help to have an established status quo that needs no explanation for the fun part to begin. At least in fic. But the narrative of the question, why do you want to make everybody gay, is not really about fan fiction. At least not from the side of those who are asking the question. Because no matter how much the fanfic writer insists that their pairings from Stanner to Steady, from Sherlock Watson to House Wilson, are just headcanons, and that they don't want nor need for them to be canon, and yes, I know, I mentioned Sherlock and Watson here for a reason, those asking the question in bad faith will always insist that the LGBTQ plus agenda is to make every single character gay in canon and retroactively destroy all the stories that came before. Because, of course, the idea that someone could have lived closeted until their 30s or 40s is completely alien to them, even if it happens more often than we know. And, of course, yes, now there are people who are asking the question, why aren't there more LGBTQ plus characters in canon? Why can't Captain Marvel and Valkyrie be a couple in the MCU even if they are not a couple in the comics? And since we are there, why can't they be a couple in the comics? And yes, why not? I have already talked about the importance of the representation in another video, and this is part of the same idea. The first reason why we should have more LGBTQ plus characters in fiction, and this means every single letter of the collective, all up and including the people in the ace spectrum, is because there are LGBTQ plus people in the real world. Art imitates life, so yeah, that's your too long didn't read answer. And this includes characters who don't need justification for being part of the community. If a character doesn't need to justify that they're straight, then another doesn't need to justify that they're bisexual or gay or trans. Of course, there are stories that you can only tell with, say, a trans person. But when we are talking about general universal stories like person A falls in love with person B during the holidays, or plucky average person finds out that they are the chosen one to save the world, then it shouldn't matter if, say, plucky average person also happens to be gay, or if person A is trans and person B is cis. Of course, those who ask that question will also go on with the But if you want representation, why can't you just create new characters? Why must you ruin the ones that already exist? To that first I ask, why the hell do you think that being LGBTQ plus ruins someone? Because the use of the word ruin is pretty telling that the person is not coming from a place of wanting to understand, but from a place of homophobia disguised as wanting to respect the original characters. Second, and this is the most important part, whenever it's new characters, we get the exact same reaction anyway. Elsa from Frozen was not a well established character before her movie came out, and the question if she could be the first gay Disney princess came right around the first trailer for the movie came out, and there were cries of, "Why must you make everyone gay?" Anyway. Third, well, established characters whose stories have been told over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, well, they are immortal for a reason. And if we have reimagined them in every possible way, and yes, this is about Sherlock and Watson, I said I was coming back to them, then why not see them as gay or bi or trans or anything that is not cis and or straight? Conan Doyle certainly didn't mind, as he literally told people that they could do whatever they wanted to his creation. And if we can have a futuristic Sherlock Holmes with a robot Watson, I think it's a bit cowardly not to have a gay Sherlock in a loving relationship with Watson. Well, a second one. Because whether people like it or not, Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law made their Sherlock and Watson as gay as it was possible without saying the word on a movie, and called it a romance, not a bromance, in every interview they could. Besides the obvious conclusion that no, just because every character and fandom you can think of has a fandom bicycle, that is, a character who gets paired with everyone regardless of gender, or if they actually met in canon, it doesn't mean that everyone wants every character to be gay, and that not only it's not a problem if there is actually a movement, petition, or even a hashtag asking producers, writers, executives to have more LGBTQ plus representation by revealing that all the new characters alike are part of the community. It is also something that is going to happen sooner rather than later, as the rainbow money is more and more accepted, and there is also, well, just one reason why not only it's perfectly okay to ship as long as you let ship. Just as no one is stopping people from shipping MM and FF couples, no one is stopping them, and you, from shipping MF couples. Given that, of course, you are respectful and stay in your lane and don't go into LGBTQ plus fandom spaces yelling about how everyone there is sick or perverted for shipping what you don't ship. Just keep that in mind. I want to thank my dear patrons, Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, and Jessica, as well as my first supporter, Tanya Pineda and Amy Song, who is the greatest human being in the planet and without whom these videos will not be possible. I also want to remind you that if you want to support this and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at patreon.com/Adalisa, written link on the description, as I know my name can be hard to spell. And with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos, as well as get access to a ton of art before anyone else. Or you can support me once at Ko-fi, also linked on my Linktree, and you will get mentioned here on my next video. If you can't support me this way, I also accept likes, subscriptions to the channels, and of course, you sharing the links. I also welcome all your questions, feedbacks, and suggestions in the comments below. This was Adalisa Zarate, and I will wait for you to join me next time with a cup of your favorite coffee or tea as December comes to an end. Well, hopefully, as this got a bit ahead of me, it's not going to be in January. And then, yes, we will talk about Airplane.